Gentleman from California is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding time, and I thank him for his defense of the Endangered Species Act, and I thank him for his how he ministers his position as the ranking member of the Resources Committee. This is an old argument. We've been around here time and again. People who don't like the Endangered Species Act have tried to put their thumb on one side of the scale of justice whenever these arguments come forward. They've tried to empower junk science and give it the status of thoughtful, proven science to get in. Now they're suggesting that the science will be based upon the party that submits it. If the right parties, if a local entity submits it, then it'll be adjudged as the best science. Whether or not it is science at all won't matter. It will simply be deemed that by the Congress of the United States, and the Department will have to follow that. That just obviously takes you to the track right back to the courtroom, where they now inspire litigation. When the citizens want to sue, then the citizens will have to go back to the courtroom because they've deemed junk science as real science, and then they'll try to limit the amount that the citizens can be compensated in terms of their lawyers. And yet, as the gentleman from Oregon just pointed out, they're going to spend millions of dollars suing the President of the United States, and they're not going to pay for any of it. They're going to charge it to the deficit. They're going to charge it to the deficit. So how is this justice coming out of the House of Representatives? The fact of the matter is, the Endangered Species Act has been effective. It's worked. It's saved species. It's returned species off of the list. And the American people truly support it in great numbers. Truly support it in great numbers, because they recognize that this is about one generation taking care of what we inherited and passing it on to another generation. People are most often pleased with the public spaces that have been preserved to protect it, to protect the various species. Has every decision been exactly right? Of course not. And that's why people go to court on both sides of the law. Nobody's suggesting that you limit it equally. This is the question of the science being used and who gets a leg up in that argument in the courts, which leads to more litigation. So the idea that you're trying to get away from litigation. But the fact of the matter is that this is an act that has caused us to pause and weigh and think about what we're doing and what the impact of that is, whether that's development, whether that's forest practices, whether that's public infrastructure, whatever it is, what's the impact beyond that project? And is that adverse, and is it detrimental to these species? Is it detrimental to the health of the neighborhoods, to the health of the communities? And very often, the endangered species has resulted in better projects being designed. Very often, better projects being designed because of those considerations, more sustainable projects being designed because of those considerations. But the fact of the matter is, many people just hate the Endangered Species Act. And so we come here, Congress after Congress, with these meat axe approaches. I spent one of the longest negotiations on a bipartisan basis trying to arrive at a conclusion on an act for the Endangered Species Act. In the 11th hour, my Republican partner, the chairman of the committee, walked out the door. I don't know why that happened. It was never communicated, but that was that. That morning, we were supposed to have a press conference to announce the agreement, but it never happened. But the hours and hours were spent. I thought we had reached a good agreement between those areas, and whatever that reason is. But the idea of frustration builds up, and you can just swing away at the Endangered Species Act. Yes, it's very popular, and it can be very controversial. I'm more concerned about what local agencies do in the name of endangered species sometimes when they ask for mitigation, that I find very unfair, that I've complained about, that I've written the agencies about. I think very often it's not so much the federal protection of endangered species, very often it's people who then want to use it at another level of government to extract from developers, from land use, for the purposes of mitigation that I think is hard to justify. And I would just hope that once again this Congress would use its good judgment, it would support the American people, it would support the Endangered Species Act, and it would in fact reject this legislation. This is really bad legislation. And you can't pretend that you care about science and at the same time say that you get to deem the best science based upon the party of submission. I have fought with agencies to get science that people have worked on, universities have worked on, introduced into the discussion. I've never suggested that they would have to accept it as the best science. I thought it would broaden the discussion. I thought it would bring another consideration to those debates. And so this is a bill that should be rejected, and the gentleman from Oregon is quite right. I would have been so much happier to spend our time on the floor here today to deal with the issues of wildfires, and not just those wildfires that are burning in California today, but by all projections, one, we're already ahead of our worst wildfire seasons this year already, and we expect it to get much worse with the persistence of this drought. And as the chairman knows and the ranking member know, in those 3 states, we're way out ahead here on wildfires. And I wish at some point we would make a decision that we would deal with these on an institutional fashion so that the firefighting assets would know what's available to them. We wouldn't scramble around. We wouldn't put other agencies in jeopardy by stealing the money from theirs accounts, but we would deal with this in an adult fashion. We would set aside money for the purposes and replenishment of those money to fight wildfire, because the alternative cannot be not to try to control those wildfires and stop the damage that they do both to the natural environment and to the private environment and the local economies that are so severely impacted by the aftermath of those fires. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to stand up here and take another meat axe approach to the Endangered Species Act, which is going to be unsuccessful, but the time we could have been talking about wildfires, the time we could have prepared for the remainder of this wildfire season, given notice to state agencies, to local agencies, to our federal agencies on what they can do to prepare and the assets that they can have in place for those wildfires. We missed that opportunity today in the name of this continued attack on the Endangered Species Act, which the American people have rejected over and over, and fortunately this Congress has rejected over and over, and I thank the gentleman for yielding his time.
The gentleman yields back.